Lieutenant Samantha Wells stood tall as she reviewed the security protocols one final time. The orbital station Unity hung in space like a shining jewel, its curved windows offering a view of the blue planet below. Today was important. Today, humans would meet the Drazari for the first time. "All teams in position?" she asked into her comm unit. "Yes, Lieutenant," came the steady voice of Corporal Nancy Diaz. "Teams Alpha and Beta are stationed at all entry points. We're ready." Samantha nodded, though no one could see her. She had chosen her team carefully for this mission. Nancy was reliable and quick-thinking. Private George Simmons had the best aim in the unit. Private Alan Pierce could spot a threat before anyone else. Together, they formed the core of the security detail protecting Ambassador Frank Butler and the human diplomatic team. "Remember," Samantha said, her voice calm but firm, "we show respect but stay alert. We know almost nothing about these aliens." The Drazari had appeared in Earth's solar system 3 weeks ago. Their massive ships entered orbit with technology far beyond anything humans had developed. They requested this meeting, and humanity had little choice but to agree. Ambassador Butler walked up to Samantha, straightening his formal blue jacket. His gray hair was neatly combed, and his expression was one of practiced calm. "How are you feeling, Lieutenant Wells?" he asked. "Ready, sir," she replied. "Though I wish they had allowed us to bring standard weapons." Butler nodded with understanding. "Diplomatic protocol. They agreed to the same restrictions. We need to show trust to build trust." Samantha didn't argue, but she had insisted that all security personnel wear thin body armor under their uniforms. The Drazari might not know it was there. A soft tone sounded throughout the station. "They're docking," Samantha said. "It's time." The human delegation moved to the large conference room. The walls were a soft white with large windows showing the stars. A round table sat in the center, with chairs spaced evenly around it. Samantha positioned her team at strategic points around the room, then took her place behind Ambassador Butler. Doors slid open. The Drazari entered and Samantha felt her breath catch. They were tall, nearly 7 feet, with bodies covered in hard, shiny exoskeletons that looked like dark green armor. Each had 4 arms and 2 legs, moving with surprising grace. Their heads featured large, compound eyes that reflected the room's light in hundreds of tiny facets. Where a human would have a mouth, they had complex mandibles that clicked and moved as they communicated. The leader stepped forward. His exoskeleton had gold markings that the others lacked. "I am Commander Zixtar of the Drazari Dominion," he said, his words translated through a small device at his throat. "We come to meet the inhabitants of this system." Ambassador Butler bowed slightly. "I am Ambassador Frank Butler of the United Earth Government. We welcome you to our solar system and look forward to peaceful discussions." The Drazari studied, the humans with their alien eyes. Samantha felt like she was being examined like a specimen. She kept her face neutral, but her hand stayed close to the hidden knife in her boot, the only weapon the security team had been allowed to keep. "Please be seated," Butler said, gesturing to the table. As the meeting began, Samantha watched the Drazari guards. They stood still, their posture similar to her own team, alert and ready. She counted 6 of them, each carrying what looked like ceremonial staffs. But Samantha wasn't fooled. Those staffs likely concealed weapons, just as her formal uniform concealed her body armor. Commander Zixtar tilted his head as Ambassador Butler explained human society and expressed hopes for friendship between their species. "Your species is remarkably fragile," the Drazari leader finally said, interrupting Butler. His mandibles clicked rapidly. "So soft, so vulnerable. How have you survived this long?" Butler's diplomatic smile didn't waver. "We're more resilient than we appear, Commander." "Perhaps," Zixtar said, but his tone suggested doubt. "In our travels, we have encountered many species. Most serve the Dominion now." The temperature in the room seemed to drop. Butler's smile faded slightly. "Serve? I believe we're here to discuss mutual cooperation, Commander." Zixtar's compound eyes gleamed. Yes, you will cooperate by accepting your place in our dominion. Your technology is primitive, your bodies are weak, but your world has resources we desire, and your people can be useful workers. Samantha tensed, catching Nancy's eye across the room. Something was wrong. This wasn't a diplomatic meeting. It was an imperial demand. Ambassador Butler straightened in his chair. I'm afraid that's not acceptable, Commander. Earth is a sovereign planet, and humans are not available for conscription into your empire. The Drazari leader made a sound that the translator didn't catch. The Drazari guards shifted their position slightly. That is unfortunate, Zixtar said. We had hoped for willing submission. Unwilling submission is messier, but achieves the same result. He raised one of his forearms in a signal. The Drazari guards raised their staffs, the ends now glowing with energy. Samantha moved instantly. Threat! Protect the ambassador, she shouted as she lunged forward, pushing Butler behind her. The first plasma bolt hit her in the shoulder, burning through her uniform and the body armor beneath. The pain was intense, like nothing she had felt before. But she remained standing, placing herself between the aliens and the human delegation. The second shot came immediately after. This time, the plasma bolt struck her left arm at the shoulder joint. There was a moment of searing agony, then nothing. Her arm separated completely, falling to the floor with a thud. Time seemed to slow. Samantha looked down at her severed limb, then at the Drazari who had fired. The alien's compound eyes showed no emotion she could read, but its mandibles were spread wide in what might have been surprise or satisfaction. Instead of collapsing as the aliens clearly expected, Samantha dropped to one knee and grabbed her severed arm by the wrist. Blood poured from her shoulder, but her military implants were already working to slow the bleeding and manage the pain. The Drazari guards hesitated, chittering to each other in their language. They had clearly expected the humans to surrender, or die easily. They weren't prepared for what happened next. With a scream that was part pain, part battle cry, Samantha swung her own severed arm like a club. The fist at the end of the limb connected with the nearest Drazari guard's head with surprising force. The alien's exoskeleton cracked, green fluid spraying out as it fell backward. Now! Samantha shouted to her team. Nancy, George, and Alan moved, immediately, tackling the surprised Drazari guards. The conference room erupted into chaos as humans fought for their lives against the technologically superior aliens who had come not as diplomats, but as conquerors. And in the center of it all was Samantha Wells, a human lieutenant who refused to fall even when part of her had been shot away. A woman who had turned her own severed limb into a weapon, showing the Drazari that humans were far more dangerous than they appeared. The conference room on Unity Station had transformed from a place of diplomacy to a battlefield in seconds. Samantha felt oddly detached from the pain of her missing arm as combat training took over. The Drazari were physically stronger than humans, but they moved with a stiffness that suggested they rarely engaged in hand-to-hand combat. "Ambassador, stay down," Samantha shouted as she swung her severed arm again, catching another Drazari guard in what appeared to be a vulnerable joint between its chest and neck plates. The alien made a high-pitched whistling sound and fell back. Across the room, Nancy Diaz had managed to wrestle one of the staff weapons away from a Drazari guard. She fired it at another alien, the plasma bolt burning through its exoskeleton. Green fluid sprayed across the white walls. "We need to move now," Nancy called, tossing a second staff weapon to George Simmons. "They've likely called for backup." Samantha nodded, fighting through the fog that threatened to cloud her mind. She was losing blood fast, despite her military implants working to seal the wound. The severed arm she wielded as a weapon was becoming stiffer, the muscles contracting in death. Commander Zixtar had retreated behind his guards, all four of his arms moving in patterns as he spoke into some kind of communication device. His compound eyes fixed on Samantha with what she thought might be disbelief. The soft one should be dead. He clicked to his guards in their language, not bothering with the translator. How is it still fighting without its limb? Samantha didn't understand the words, but she understood the tone. The Drazari had underestimated humans, a mistake that might give her team the edge they needed to escape. "Alan, get the ambassador to the door," she ordered. Private Pierce moved immediately, helping Ambassador Butler to his feet and shielding him with his body as they edged toward the exit. More Drazari poured into the room, these wearing what looked like heavier battle armor. The situation was getting worse by the second. Samantha felt a wave of dizziness hit her. She stumbled, nearly falling. In that moment of weakness, Commander Zixtar struck. He moved with surprising speed for his size, one of his lower arms extending a blade that gleamed under the lights. "Samantha," Nancy shouted in warning. Samantha barely managed to duck as the blade sliced through the air where her head had been. She swung her severed arm one last time, but the movement was weak. The arm was becoming less useful as a weapon as rigor mortis set in. George fired the stolen staff weapon at Zixtar, but the commander's armor absorbed the blast. 3 more Drazari guards entered the room, staff weapons raised. "We can't win this fight," Samantha realized. "We need to run. Nancy, make us an exit." Nancy understood immediately. She aimed her stolen weapon at the wall beside the main door and fired 3 rapid shots. The wall, designed for a space station and not a battlefield, melted away to reveal a maintenance corridor beyond. "Go!" Samantha ordered. She dropped her now useless severed arm and grabbed a staff weapon from a fallen Drazari with her remaining hand. Ambassador first, then Alan, George, Nancy. Ambassador Butler didn't argue. Alan helped him through the newly created exit, followed by George, who continued to fire at the advancing Drazari to cover their retreat. Nancy hesitated. "Lieutenant?" "That's an order, Corporal," Samantha said firmly. "I'll be right behind you." Nancy nodded and slipped through the hole. Samantha backed toward the exit, firing the stolen weapon to keep the Drazari at bay. The weapon felt awkward in her right hand. She had always been left-handed, but she managed to hit 2 more guards, sending them down in sprays of green fluid. As she reached the exit, Commander Zixtar stepped forward, his mandibles clicking rapidly. "This is not over, human," he said through his translator. "No planet has ever resisted the Dominion." Samantha met his alien gaze steadily. "You made a mistake today," she said, fighting to keep her voice from shaking as blood loss weakened. You thought we were easy prey." With that, she fired one last shot at the ceiling above the Drazari commander. The plasma bolt struck a support beam, bringing down a section of ceiling panels. It wouldn't stop them for long, but it might buy her team precious seconds. Samantha stumbled through the exit into the maintenance corridor where her team waited. Nancy immediately moved to support her. "We need to get to our shuttle," Samantha said, her voice weaker than she wanted it to be. "They'll lock down the station." "This way," Nancy replied, taking charge as Samantha's strength failed. "I memorized the station schematics. There's a service path that connects directly to the docking bay." The narrow corridor was dimly lit with emergency lighting. The human group moved as quickly as they could, with George and Nancy supporting Samantha between them. Alan led the way with Ambassador Butler close behind. "Lieutenant Wells," the ambassador said as they hurried through the station. "That was the bravest thing I've ever seen." Samantha managed a weak smile. "Just doing my job, sir. Diplomatic security includes handling unexpected amputation." Her attempted humor was undermined by the paleness of her face. The implants were working, but they had limits. She needed proper medical attention soon. Alarms began to sound throughout the station. Red emergency lights flashed along the corridors. "They're sealing the sections," Alan warned from the front. "We need to move faster." They reached a junction where 3 corridors met. Alan paused, looking uncertain for the first time. "Left," Nancy said firmly. "Then 2 rights and we'll reach the emergency access to the docking bay." As they turned left, a group of Drazari appeared at the far end of the corridor. The aliens raised their weapons. "Down!" George shouted, pushing Samantha and Nancy to the floor as plasma bolts shot over their heads. Alan returned fire with his stolen staff weapon. One of the Drazari fell, but the others kept advancing. "We're trapped," Ambassador Butler said, his diplomatic calm finally breaking. Samantha forced herself to focus through the pain and blood loss. "No," she said. "We're not done yet." She pointed to a panel on the wall. "Nancy, can you access the station controls from there?" Nancy crawled to the panel and ripped it open, revealing a complex array of wiring. "I think so, if you give me a minute." "We don't have a minute," Alan said, continuing to exchange fire with the advancing Drazari. Nancy's fingers worked quickly, connecting and disconnecting wires. "Almost got it." Suddenly, the gravity in their section of the corridor shut off. The humans, prepared for the change, braced themselves against the walls. The Drazari, caught by surprise, began to float helplessly, their heavy exoskeletons providing no advantage in zero gravity. "Now's our chance," Samantha said. "Push off and go." Using the walls to propel themselves, the human team moved past the confused Drazari. In zero gravity, Samantha's injury was less of a hindrance, though blood now formed disturbing floating globules around her. They reached the emergency access to the docking bay. Through the small window, they could see their shuttle, and 4 Drazari guards floating nearby, clearly having the same gravity issues. "One last push," Samantha told her team. "We get to that shuttle, we get home." George and Alan exchanged a look. Then, with determined expressions, they prepared to open the door and make their final dash for freedom. A race that would determine not just their fate, but possibly the fate of Earth itself. Alan counted down with his fingers. 3, 2, 1. George pushed the emergency release button. The door to the docking bay slid open, and the team pushed off from the walls, propelling themselves through zero gravity toward their shuttle. The 4 Drazari guards by the shuttle noticed immediately. They fired their weapons, but without gravity to stabilize them, each shot sent them spinning in the opposite direction. Their plasma bolts went wide, hitting walls and equipment instead of the humans. "They're not trained for zero-G combat," Nancy observed as she pulled herself along using handholds on the walls. Samantha was struggling to keep up. The loss of blood had weakened her significantly, and with only one arm, she couldn't move as efficiently through the weightless environment. George dropped back to help her. "I've got you, Lieutenant," he said, grabbing her good arm and pulling her forward. The Drazari were learning quickly. One had anchored itself to a support beam and was taking more careful aim. "Look out!" Alan shouted. He pushed off from a cargo container, intercepting the plasma bolt meant for Ambassador Butler. The shot grazed his leg, burning through his uniform. Alan gritted his teeth against the pain but kept moving. They were halfway to the shuttle now. Ambassador Butler reached a control panel near the docking clamps. "If I can just," he muttered, his fingers working the controls. Suddenly, alarms blared throughout the docking bay. "There! I've initiated emergency protocols. The station thinks there's a hull breach. It will seal off this section in 30 seconds. The Drazari seemed to understand what was happening. Their movements became more frantic as they tried to stop the humans from reaching the shuttle. Nancy had made it to the shuttle door first. She quickly entered the access code and the door slid open. "Come on," she called to the others. Alan helped the ambassador into the shuttle next. George pushed Samantha ahead of him, but as he turned to follow, a plasma bolt struck him directly in the back. "George!" Samantha cried out as he floated limply in the zero gravity. Without hesitation, Nancy launched herself back out of the shuttle. She grabbed George's uniform and pulled him toward the open door. Another plasma bolt narrowly missed her head. "The bay doors are closing," Alan shouted from inside the shuttle. Indeed, the large outer doors of the docking bay had begun to slide shut, responding to the false hull breach alert. Nancy gave one final push, sending George through the shuttle door before pulling herself in after him. Samantha hit the close button, and the shuttle door sealed just as the first Drazari reached it. "Get us out of here," Samantha ordered, her voice weak but commanding. Nancy jumped into the pilot's seat. Her hands flew over the controls, disengaging the docking clamps. The shuttle broke free just as the bay doors finished closing, trapping the Drazari inside. "Hang on," Nancy warned as she fired the engines at full thrust. The shuttle shot away from Unity Station, pushing them all back into their seats as artificial gravity engaged. In the back of the shuttle, Ambassador Butler was checking George's condition. "He's alive, but the wound is serious," he reported. "He needs medical attention." "We all do," Alan said grimly, looking at Samantha's missing arm and his own burned leg. Samantha fought to stay conscious. "Set course for the USS Resolute," she instructed Nancy. "They're waiting at the edge of the system and send an emergency signal, code red." Nancy nodded, her face grim as she input the coordinates. "What about the Drazari ships?" As if in answer to her question, the shuttle's sensors began to beep urgently. 3 Drazari vessels had detached from Unity Station and were now in pursuit. "They're faster than us," Nancy reported after checking the readings. "They'll catch us before we reach the Resolute." Samantha closed her eyes for a moment, gathering her remaining strength. When she opened them again, there was determination in her gaze. "Ambassador Butler, I need your help." The ambassador moved to her side. "What can I do, Lieutenant?" "I need you to record a message," she said. "Tell Earth exactly what happened. Here. The Drazari aren't here for peace, they want conquest." As the ambassador used the shuttle's communication system to record his message, Samantha turned to Nancy. "We need to buy time for that message to reach Earth." Nancy understood. "Evasive maneuvers? Yes, but more than that." Samantha pointed to the shuttle's small weapons system on the control panel. "We have 2 defensive missiles. Not much against their ships, but if we target their engines specifically..." Alan joined them at the front of the shuttle, limping on, his injured leg. "We could slow them down." The shuttle shook as the lead Drazari ship fired a warning shot across their path. "Incoming transmission," Nancy announced. Commander Zixtar's face appeared on the small screen. His compound eyes seemed to glitter with anger. "Return to the station immediately," he ordered. "Your resistance is pointless and will only result in your deaths." Ambassador Butler stepped forward, into view of the transmission. "We reject your demands, Commander. Earth will never submit to the Dominion." Zixtar's mandibles clicked rapidly. "You have no choice. Your shuttle is damaged, your warriors injured. You cannot escape." Samantha pulled herself up next to the ambassador, making sure the Drazari commander could see her bloody, severed shoulder. "You made a mistake today," she said, repeating her words from earlier. "You thought humans were weak. You thought cutting off a limb would stop us. But you only gave me a weapon and showed us your true intentions." She signaled to Nancy to cut the transmission. "Now," Samantha said, her voice growing weaker. "Execute. Evasive pattern Delta and prepare to fire missiles on my mark." Nancy piloted the shuttle in a series of unpredictable movements, making it harder for the Drazari ships to get a lock on them. The small human craft dove and spun through space using a nearby asteroid field for additional cover. "The message?" Samantha asked the ambassador. "Sent on all emergency channels," he confirmed. "If any human ship is in range, they'll receive it." "The Resolute will come," Samantha said with certainty. "But we need to survive long enough for them to reach us." The shuttle rocked violently as a Drazari weapon grazed their hull. "Hull breach in the cargo section," Alan reported, checking. "The damage control panel. Emergency seals holding, but we can't take another hit like that." Nancy brought the shuttle around a large asteroid, momentarily hiding them from the Drazari ships. "Ready to fire missiles," she said, her finger hovering over the control. "Wait for it," Samantha instructed, watching the sensor readings. "Wait until they commit to a direction." The seconds stretched out. The Drazari ship split up, trying to circle around both sides of the asteroid. "Now," Samantha ordered. "Target the lead ship's propulsion system." Nancy fired both missiles. They streaked across space toward the largest Drazari vessel. The alien ship tried to evade, but the missiles had been fired from too close range. They struck the ship's engine section, causing a series of small explosions. "Direct hit," Alan exclaimed. The damaged Drazari ship began to drift, its engines disabled. The other 2 ships slowed, moving to assist their stricken companion. "That won't hold them for long," Samantha said. "But it might be enough. Push the engines to maximum. Get us to the Resolute." As Nancy complied, Samantha finally allowed herself to slump back in her seat. The adrenaline that had kept her going was fading fast. She looked down at her missing arm, thinking of how she had used it as a weapon against their attackers. "Lieutenant, stay with us," Ambassador Butler urged, noticing her fading consciousness. "Help is coming." "Tell them," Samantha whispered. her vision growing dark around the edges. "Tell Earth what we're up against. The Drazari think we're weak, but they don't understand humans at all." As the shuttle raced toward the edge of the system, carrying its warning message for Earth, Samantha Wells finally lost her battle with consciousness. Her last thought was of the shocked look in the Drazari commander's alien eyes when she had picked up her own severed arm and used it to fight back. The humans might be physically softer than the Drazari, but they had a hardness of spirit that the aliens had never encountered before. And that might just be what would save Earth in the coming war. Samantha opened her eyes slowly. A bright light shined above her. For a moment she thought she was dead. Then the pain returned, a dull throbbing where her left arm used to be. She was alive. "She's awake," said a woman's voice. A face came into view. A woman with short brown hair and a captain's uniform leaned over her. "Lieutenant Wells, welcome back. I'm Captain Olivia Reed of the USS Resolute." Samantha tried to speak, but her throat was dry. The captain offered her water, holding the cup, as Samantha sipped through a straw. "The others?" Samantha managed to ask. "All alive," Captain Reed assured her. "Ambassador Butler is unharmed. Private Pierce's leg will heal. Private Simmons is still in surgery, but the doctors are optimistic." Samantha nodded, relieved. Then she remembered. "The Drazari..." Captain Reed's expression grew serious. "We received..." "The ambassador's message. The Resolute intercepted your shuttle just as the remaining Drazari ships were closing in. We brought you aboard and have retreated to a safe distance." "We need to warn Earth," Samantha said, trying to sit up. "Easy, Lieutenant," the captain said, gently pushing her back down. "The warning has been sent. Earth Defense Command received the ambassador's full report. They're preparing for possible hostilities." Samantha relaxed slightly. At least Earth would not be caught by surprise if the Drazari attacked. "How long was I out?" she asked. 12 hours, Captain Reed replied. "You lost a lot of blood. The medical team has stabilized you and prepped your shoulder for a cybernetic replacement when we get back to Earth." Samantha looked down at the bandaged stump where her arm had been. The medical team had cleaned and sealed the wound properly. It didn't look as bad as she had feared. "The Drazari have been broadcasting messages across all frequencies," Captain Reed continued. "They're demanding that we return to Unity Station for peaceful negotiations. But they've also called for reinforcements from outside the system." "They're not interested in peace," Samantha said firmly. "They want Earth to submit to their dominion. They see us as weak." The captain nodded. "That's what the ambassador reported. But here's something interesting. They're specifically talking about you in their communications." "Me?" Samantha was surprised. "Yes, our translators have been working to decipher their language. They keep referring to something that translates roughly as the human who wields death parts, or the warrior who turns wounds into weapons. We think they mean you and what you did with your arm." Samantha felt a chill. They didn't expect that. I saw it in their eyes, or whatever they have that passes for eyes. They were shocked. "It seems to have made quite an impression," Captain Reed agreed. "Do you feel up to a briefing? Admiral Joe Dawson is waiting to speak with you via secure channel." Samantha nodded. "Yes, I can manage that." With the captain's help, Samantha sat up. A nurse adjusted her bed and helped her into a more comfortable position. Captain Reed placed a tablet in Samantha's lap and activated the screen. The stern face of Admiral Dawson appeared. His gray hair was cut short, and deep lines framed his mouth. His eyes softened when he saw Samantha. "Lieutenant Wells," he said. "Good to see you. Conscious, how are you feeling?" "Ready to serve, Admiral," Samantha replied automatically. The Admiral almost smiled. "That's what I expected you to say. Your actions aboard Unity Station have changed everything, Lieutenant. Both the good and the bad." "Sir, the good news is that we now know the Drazari's true intentions before they could launch a surprise attack. The bad news is that we're facing a technologically superior enemy who has now declared their hostility openly." Samantha nodded. "They're arrogant, sir. They underestimated us once. They might do it again." "That's what I wanted to discuss with you," Admiral Dawson said. Our intelligence suggests that the Drazari have never encountered a species like humans before. Most life forms they've conquered have exoskeletons like they do or other natural armor. They seem genuinely disturbed by your resilience. Captain Reed spoke up. They've been sending images of Lieutenant Wells throughout their fleet. Our intelligence has intercepted some of their communications. They're using her as an example of why humans are dangerous. Admiral Dawson nodded. Exactly, and we want to use that to our advantage. Samantha understood immediately. Psychological warfare. Precisely, the Admiral confirmed. Earth is mobilizing all defenses, but honestly, our technology doesn't match theirs. We need every advantage we can get, including fear. A knock at the door interrupted them. Nancy Diaz entered, her arm in a sling, an injury Samantha hadn't even noticed during their escape. Sorry to interrupt, Nancy said, but there's a development. The Drazari are broadcasting again, but this time in English. They're demanding to speak with the human warrior who fights with her own severed limb. Admiral Dawson's eyebrows rose. They're asking for you specifically, Lieutenant. Samantha looked down at her missing arm, then back at the screen. What do you want me to do, sir? Talk to them, the Admiral said. Find out what they want, but remember, you're now a symbol to them. Whatever they saw and what you did has them rattled. Use that. Captain Reed helped Samantha into a wheelchair. Together with Nancy, they went to the ship's communication center. The room was filled with officers monitoring various screens and instruments. They all turned to look at Samantha as she entered. Put the Drazari transmission on the main screen, Captain Reed ordered. The large screen at the front of the room flickered to life. Commander Zixtar's alien face appeared, his compound eyes shimmering under the lights of his ship. I will speak only with the human warrior, he said through his translator. Captain Reed nodded to Samantha and a technician adjusted the camera to focus on her. This is Lieutenant Samantha Wells, she said, her voice stronger than she felt. What do you want, Commander? The Drazari's mandibles clicked rapidly. You are the one who continued to fight after losing a limb, the one who used her own severed arm as a weapon. It wasn't a question, but Samantha answered anyway. Yes. Our species has conquered 12 solar systems, Zixtar said. We have encountered many forms of life. None have ever done what you did. Samantha held the alien's gaze. Humans adapt. We survive. We use whatever tools are available, even parts of ourselves, if necessary. The command center was completely silent as everyone watched this strange exchange. The Dominion Council is reconsidering our approach to your species, Zixtar said finally. We believed humans would submit easily due to your soft exteriors. We now understand this was an error in judgment. Admiral Dawson's voice came through. Samantha's earpiece. Ask him if they're withdrawing. Are you saying you're withdrawing from our system? Samantha asked. No, Zixtar replied immediately. But we propose a meeting, not on your terms or ours, neutral ground, to discuss alternatives to traditional submission. The officers in the command center exchanged glances. This was unexpected. Why should we trust you after what happened on Unity Station? Samantha demanded. The Drazari commander's alien features were impossible to read, but his voice through the translator sounded almost respectful. Because now we understand what we face. A species that turns injuries into advantages is not one to be conquered lightly. Admiral Dawson whispered in Samantha's ear again. Tell him we'll consider it. We need time. Samantha nodded slightly. We will consider your request, Commander. But know this. If you or any other Drazari attack humans again, you'll find that what I did with my arm was just the beginning of how creative we can be when threatened. The Drazari commander stared at her for a long moment before responding. We await your decision, human warrior. The screen went dark. Captain Reed let out a breath she had been holding. Well, Lieutenant Wells, it seems you've become humanity's most effective diplomat by using your own severed arm as a club. For the first time since the attack, Samantha smiled. Not exactly what they teach at diplomatic security training. As the officers began discussing this unexpected development, Samantha looked down at the empty space where her left arm had been. The Drazari had meant to demoralize and defeat her by removing it. Instead, they had given humanity its first victory in what might have been a devastating war. Sometimes, she thought, losing something shows your enemy exactly what they should fear. 3 months had passed since the incident on Unity Station. Earth had changed in that time. Cities now had defensive shields. Military recruitment had doubled. Everyone was preparing for a possible war with the Drazari, even as diplomatic talks continued. Samantha stood at the window of her apartment in Washington, D.C., looking out at the gray winter sky. She raised her new left arm, watching as the advanced cybernetic limb responded to her thoughts. The metal and synthetic materials gleamed in the dim light. It was stronger than her old arm had been, with built-in tools and even a small shield. Generator, the best technology Earth could create. Her door chimed. "Enter," she called. Nancy Diaz walked in wearing her dress uniform with new corporal's stripes. "Ready for the big day, Lieutenant? Or should I say Captain Wells?" Samantha smiled. Her promotion had come through last week along with medals for everyone on her team. "As ready as I'll ever be. How's George doing?" "Much better," Nancy replied. "He's walking again. The doctors say he'll make a full recovery." "And Alan?" "Already back on duty. His leg healed faster than expected." Samantha nodded, pleased that her team had survived. Not everyone had been so lucky in the skirmishes that followed the Unity Station incident. 3 Earth ships had been damaged in brief encounters with Drazari vessels before the current ceasefire was established. "The car is waiting downstairs," Nancy said. "Ambassador Butler sent it." Samantha checked her reflection in the mirror. Her dress uniform fit perfectly, the empty left sleeve replaced by one that accommodated her new cybernetic arm. She had considered hiding the arm under gloves but decided against it. Let the Drazari see what their attack had led to, a stronger, more determined human. The car took them to the newly constructed neutral ground station, built in orbit between Earth and Mars, specifically for the meetings with the Drazari. Unlike Unity Station, this one was designed with security as the primary concern. Every corridor, every room had multiple escape routes and defensive capabilities. As they approached in the shuttle, Samantha could see the massive Drazari ship already docked on one side. The alien vessel was at least 3 times the size of Earth's largest battleship. Its dark green hull was covered in what looked like armor plates mirroring the exoskeletons of its crew. "Impressive, isn't it?" said Ambassador Butler, who had joined them for the shuttle ride. "But I'd rather have you on our side than 10 ships like that." Samantha shook her head. "I just did what any soldier would do, sir." "Perhaps," the ambassador said. "But you've become something more than a soldier now. You've become a symbol. To us and to them." Samantha knew he was right. Her image was everywhere on Earth. Recruitment posters, news programs, social media. The woman who fought with her own arm was how they referred to her. Children sent her drawings. Veterans saluted her in the street. It was uncomfortable, being famous for what had been a desperate act of survival. The shuttle docked, and they were escorted to the main conference room by a team of heavily armed security officers. The room was circular, with a round table in the center, no head, no foot, all equals. One half of the room was adjusted for human comfort, Earth-standard gravity, temperature, and lighting. The other half was set for Drazari preferences, slightly higher gravity, warmer temperatures, and dimmer, redder light. Admiral Dawson and several high-ranking military officers and politicians were already there, along with scientists and cultural experts. Samantha took her assigned seat beside the Admiral, with Nancy standing behind her as her aide. "Captain Wells," Admiral Dawson greeted her. "Glad you could join us. The Drazari delegation specifically requested your presence today." "Did they say why, sir?" "No, but I suspect it has something to do with the final terms of our agreement." For weeks, human and Drazari representatives had been negotiating. The Drazari had initially demanded that Earth acknowledge their superiority while remaining independent. Earth had refused completely. Gradually, both sides had moved towards something more like a mutual non-aggression pact, with limited cultural and technological exchange. A tone sounded and the doors on the Drazari side of the room slid open. Commander Zixtar entered first, followed by several other Drazari of various sizes and with different colored markings on their exoskeletons. Behind them came a much larger Drazari, its exoskeleton almost black with ornate gold patterns covering much of its surface. The Supreme Counselor, Admiral Dawson, whispered to Samantha. The highest authority in the Dominion. This is unprecedented. The Drazari took their places around their side of the table. The Supreme Counselor sat directly across from Admiral Dawson. Commander Zixtar was seated across from Samantha, his compound eyes fixed on her cybernetic arm. Ambassador Butler opened the meeting with formal greetings which were translated for the Drazari. The Supreme Counselor responded with equally formal words. But Samantha noticed that the large alien's gaze kept returning to her, studying her with those unreadable compound eyes. Finally, after the initial exchanges were complete, the Supreme Counselor spoke directly to Samantha. Captain Wells, the translator conveyed, your actions have caused much discussion among our people. Samantha nodded but said nothing, waiting. In the history of the Dominion, the Supreme Counselor continued, we have encountered many species. Some fought with great weapons, some surrendered immediately, some tried to deceive us, but never have we met a species that would use its own severed body parts as weapons. The room was completely silent. Everyone waited for what would come next. Our initial assessment of humans was incorrect, the Supreme Counselor admitted. We saw your soft exteriors and assumed weakness. We did not understand that this softness comes with an adaptability and resilience our people do not possess. The alien leader gestured to one of its attendants, who stepped forward carrying what looked like a small ornate box. The attendant placed it on the table in front of Samantha. Open it, the Supreme Counselor instructed. Admiral Dawson nodded slightly, indicating it was safe. Samantha reached out with her cybernetic hand and lifted the lid of the box. Inside was a small object that looked like a shard of dark green material, like a piece of Drazari exoskeleton set in a metal frame. This is a piece of my ancestor's shell, the Supreme Counselor explained. A sacred relic of our people. I give it to you as a symbol of our respect. In return, we ask for a comparable token from you. Samantha understood immediately what they wanted. She looked at Admiral Dawson, who nodded again. You want a piece of my original arm, she said. Yes. Commander Zixtar spoke for the first time. The limb you wielded against us has been preserved, as is our custom with significant objects from battle. We request a small portion to seal our agreement. Samantha considered this. It was strange, macabre even by human standards. But she understood the importance of symbols in diplomacy. If our medical team approves and if it helps secure peace between our peoples, I agree, she said. The Supreme Counselor's mandibles moved in what the humans had come to recognize as a gesture of respect. Then we have the foundation for lasting peace, not based on submission but on mutual respect born in battle. As the meeting continued with the final details of the agreement, Samantha looked down at her cybernetic arm, then at the Drazari relic she had been given. From a desperate act on a space station to a symbol that might prevent interstellar war. Her sacrifice had become something more important than she could have imagined. Later, as they prepared to leave the station, Nancy stood beside her at the viewing window. Together they watched Earth spinning below them, peaceful and blue. Did you ever think, Nancy asked, that losing your arm would end up saving Earth? Samantha shook her head. No. But it's a good reminder that strength isn't always where you expect to find it. Sometimes it's not in what you have, but in how you use what you've lost. The Drazari ships were beginning to move away from the station, returning to their positions at the edge of the solar system as agreed in the treaty. They would remain there, watching, learning, reassessing their understanding of humanity. And humanity would do the same, preparing not just with weapons and shields, but with new knowledge. In the vastness of space, appearances could be deceiving. Sometimes the most dangerous opponent wasn't the one with the hardest shell, but the one with the strongest will to survive.